But what is a cock and bull story? And what do we mean by spit and sawdust? And why is a raven like a writing desk? 2 out of the 3 of those will be answered in today's episode of Virtual Pub Project. Go into a little bit more of the history stuff of pubs, as people seem to like those very much. And I'll look at a couple of phrases that we have in the English language that actually came from pubs. So one I'm sure everyone has always heard of is a bit of a spit and sawdust place. That meaning a place is quite rough or a bit, not as primmed and proper and nice as maybe some people would like. Where'd that phrase come from? That's actually a pub phrase. It comes from pubs. So mid-Victorian period, especially some of the poorer towns, sort of the Black Country and that, where you've got a lot of miners and things like that. Obviously you go mining, you've got all this dust and all this dirt and all this rubbish that's coming into your lungs. And what happens when you get dust and dirt in your lungs? You start coughing. And your body creates phlegm and horrible things that soak up all of that dust and dirt, and then you've got to spit it out somewhere. Back then, bell rang, right, everyone off to the pub for a few pints before we go back to the wife. So everyone would flock to their pub, and they'd get their beers and they'd start drinking. Problem is that they'd also continue coughing, and that phlegm's got to go somewhere. So obviously the bars would put their spadoons out. This is another thing, if you remember our last video we did on glasses, where they had the segregation in the pubs. You didn't want to sit with the mining common folk who were coughing up all this horrible phlegm and all this horrible nastiness. And put them somewhere else, and we'll have our drinks over here. But yeah, so that was a common thing, because we didn't have dust masters or anything back then. They didn't really understand that sort of stuff. So people were coughing up all of this phlegm and nastiness. It's got to go somewhere. You couldn't find a spadoon? Onto the floor it went. This gave a huge problem for publicans, because they've got a lot of unpleasantness that they've got to clean up. And if you're a really rough place and there was the odd falling out, then there'd be other liquids that needed to be, cleaned. How do you do that? Well, this is hours of cleaning. Or you go to the local sawmill, buy up some barrels of sawdust, and you sprinkle it all over your floor. Your patrons come in, they get drunk, and they spit everywhere, and then Michael's had another punch up, and he's got a bloody nose, and there's blood everywhere, and then you kick him out. And to save you a few hours cleaning, you just get a broom, you sweep up all of your sawdust, which has soaked up all of that unpleasantness, stick it on the fire out back, burn it all up, put some fresh down tomorrow. So that's where the phrase spit and sawdust came from. It was when pubs, had their lower class areas where people were going to be coughing up all these horrid, unpleasant substances quite regularly. And it was just a quick, efficient way to clean back in ye olde days. I'm going to open up my notes now. Another one I'm sure you've all heard. Cock and bull story. Oh, you don't believe that cock and bull story. Pub phrase. So, many, many moons ago, back when you couldn't just hop on a train and go over to London, you had to spend days, weeks, whatever, travelling. Normally by horse and cart. And that's when we had coaching inns, where you could take your coach, your carriage, and you could, stable your horses and have your cart looked after, have a nice beer, relax for a day or two. Never, especially around the medieval period, you weren't allowed to stay there for more than 3 days. Reason being is because if you stayed in a pub for more than 3 days, you were considered to be part of the landlord's household. And if you did a crime, the landlord could get a bit of a slap for it as well. So you weren't allowed to stay more than 3 days, that was it. Side note. Anyway, we take our story to, he says, looking at his notes, Stratford. There we go, Stratford. Stony Stratford, to be precise. Where there were these 2 rival coach houses in this sort of town that were a little bit of bantering with each other. So they would try and prove that we're the better pub. You don't want to go down that pub. No, we're the better pub. And the way they sort of decided to do this was they started making up stories. Quite famously started making up stories. Ah, yes, Queen Elizabeth herself came into this pub yesterday. She had a pint of our locally made cider, and it was so good that she knighted everyone in the pub. True story, true story. And the other pub would go, well, you know, we were so good that a local businessman, he emptied his wallet because this was such a good pub. He thought, I cannot pay you enough money. Please take my money. It's so good. And these stories carried on, and they escalated and carried on and carried on and carried on and carried on. And it just so happens that the name of those two pubs was The Cock and The Bull. To the point that if a traveller ever spoke to a local about these stories, people would use the phrase, cock and bull story, meaning stories from the cock and the bull, where they were making up these ridiculous ideas that their pubs were this so much better, so great, awesome. Nice short one today, because I've unfortunately got other bits I need to be getting on with. We're trying to get something ready. If you've seen on Facebook, we are doing By the Candles Light, a night of music, and just trying to get some community going through Facebook. So check that one out if you're looking at this video. I'll try and put a link in the description somewhere. The usual jazz, people. I've got Patreon. Come give us a help on Patreon. Just give so we can get some money raised for the NHS. And obviously the best one for us, because it makes us feel like we're still open a little bit. Hit that Deliveroo. We got pints, we got cocktails, we got the food. Sorry it's a short one, but until tomorrow, this has been Virtual Pub Update episode 11, and we will see you tomorrow. Like, share, and if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe and bell icon. Ooh. See you tomorrow.